Nostalgia, by the very definition, means a sentimental longing or wistful affection of the past. It's almost as if it's a painful sort of love of time we're no longer able to revisit, but instead it's just a distant memory. But here we are 26 years later, playing the same game that we were in 1993. A game that is often viewed as one of the greatest games ever made, an odd compilation of Zelda mixed with Mario, in a world filled with charm and mystery. Discoveries to be found and dungeons to be explored. But with this new coat of paint on an old-time classic, does our rose-tinted glasses hold up? Was it truly as great as we remember? And will the more modern gamers too fall in love and repeat the cycle? This is my review of Zelda: Link's Awakening. Anytime you play a remake of an old classic, there's always two questions that needs to be asked. Will the fans of the original like this? And will the more modern gamers trying it for the first time also enjoy it with the new coat of paint? It's a balancing act that developers must approach with care and caution. In Zelda: Link's Awakening, while the game may look drastically different in terms of artistic vision, it's actually a near identical replica of the original. From every patch of grass to enemy, they're all exactly where they were 26 years ago. Sure, a few things may look prettier now, and this game is actually quite the looker. When they first announced Link's Awakening, I wasn't really a big fan of the art style, and actually preferred the original. But now that I have seen it in motion, all of those complaints have completely vanished. It's cute, and frankly, it's kind of gorgeous with a shiny coat, glimmering backgrounds with a motion blur in surrounding areas. There are some frame rate issues, but never really distracting enough to bypass my enjoyment. But beyond visuals and art style, yes, the story is the same, and so is the puzzles. But what Link's Awakening offers now is quality of life improvements, and this is where the game shines. See, back in 1993, Link's Awakening released on the Game Boy with black and white graphics, and the Game Boy only had 4 buttons and a directional D-pad to move your character around. These buttons were A, B, select, and start, so I think you're starting to see the issue here. In any isometric Zelda game, the items you find are of great importance and helps you solve the mini puzzles of the world. Whether you're navigating to the next dungeon or trying to fight a boss, these items are your complete guide. And there wasn't exactly a great way to map the controls on the original Game Boy. And this is in comparison with the Nintendo Switch, which has 12 buttons, a D-pad, and 2 analog sticks to go along with that. So instead of navigating the endless menus that the original was plagued with to change items, in the remake several of the items you unlock are mapped to their own unique buttons. The Pegasus boots that you unlock is mapped to your shoulder button, allowing you to run as an example. The power bracelet no longer requires you to hold it, but instead you can simply press A to pick up a large item such as rocks and pots. Sure, there still is some weapon swapping which can be mapped to your X and Y button, but it's still a large improvement over the original, and it no longer feels like a huge annoyance. And speaking of quality of life changes, you're now able to mark your map with several different icons that will remind you to revisit a place that you cannot access at that moment. At times I felt as if I were a pirate marking treasure on my map, but this small change cut down a lot of confusion that I typically have while playing these type of games, which kept me from being lost for too long. But beyond these small quality of life changes, the game is almost nearly identical to the original. There's a few other new things, such as Dawnpay, which offers little to enjoy, and I'll talk more about that in a bit, and some more hidden seashells that were not in the original. The question now is, how does the game actually hold up? And that is where the level design completely takes over. While we have seen games become bigger and bigger in terms of their open world design, games like Link's Awakening was much smaller in comparison, but it was its level design that is so refreshing. In today's games, I'm often greeted with huge worlds, but at times it feels they're barren and empty. I go from point A to point B with no excitement and exploration, but here with a much smaller world, but not overly linear either, it doesn't feel like a chore going back and forth. Thankfully, it also has warp points to make it even less frustrating. But several locations can't be accessed until you complete a specific dungeon and unlock a new item, and with that, almost every location seems to have a purpose. It's as if the island is one large puzzle and keeps your brain ticking to where to go next, a labyrinth of sort. The game never feels too hard, and some of the bosses feel overly easy, but it does, however, also offer a harder difficulty for those seeking more of a challenge. But it's the puzzles and its dungeons that it excels in. At times you feel smart when you complete a clever puzzle and get to your destination, and for these type of games, I do encourage you to figure out each puzzle on your own rather than following a guide, because the completion of each puzzle is the reward. There's also a few mini-games such as fishing or the claw, but nothing that will keep you invested for hours on end. It's the main core gameplay that is so enduring. And something about the world that you may notice is that there seems to be an odd mix of Mario characters in a Zelda game. Link's Awakening has Goombas, Chain Chomps, Boo, as well as several others. In fact, there is times you even have small 2D platforming areas, and this is some of that odd charm I was speaking of earlier, and it carries on throughout the entire game. There's even a point where you're able to walk a Chain Chomp by the name of Bow Wow to access the next location. And this is only a few of the references from Mario and secrets that you'll find, but I'll leave those for you to discover yourself. Then there's the story, and while Zelda Link's Awakening is cute on the surface, this game in particular is very engaging with one of the more satisfying stories in the franchise. At the beginning of the game, you're simply washed onto an island, and then you're left to discover the secrets of said island. There's no saving Zelda or a Triforce, but rather the story is engaging for entirely different reasons completely, and because of this, it's truly one of the more unique installments in the Zelda franchise, a one-of-a-kind of sorts. And speaking of a one-of-a-kind, there is Donpei, some of the only new content where you can create your own dungeons. Well, kind of. While yes, you can make your own dungeon, you really have to follow what Donpei wants you to do by meeting his requirements, and then sadly, you're unable to share your content with the rest of the world. In theory, Zelda Maker sounds like a good idea, and may be able to stand toe-to-toe with the more popular Mario Maker, but unfortunately, this is not it. Instead, it feels like a creation tool with little scope to offer much interesting. Nonetheless, it doesn't really detract from the excellence of the entire package, and you can just ignore it if you want to. Which brings me back to the original question of this review. Anytime you play a remake of an old-time classic, you have to have a balance. You're not just trying to satisfy the old-school fans, but you're trying to capture the imagination of the more modern gamer. So how does Link's Awakening hold up with bare minimum changes outside of the art style? And to that, I say this is just as good as it was in 1993. With the simple quality of life changes, you are greeted with one of the best games ever made that transcends time and eras. The 90s was viewed as the golden era of video games met with innovation, and within that era there was Link's Awakening, reborn in 2019 as yet once again an instant classic.